Welcome to Innovators Unscripted, the podcast for innovators by innovators. Tina and I are back after a brief hiatus, and we are so excited to welcome our fellow Chicago 24 Innovator alum, Shira Moskovitz, who is not only an innovator, but also a true inspiration. We are so excited to have you on, especially after this little break we've had. It's great to see a friendly, smiling face. So Shira, before we jump in, can you just take a little minute and introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. So, first of all, thank you for having me. I am Shira Moskowitz. I teach special ed and technology in New York City. I also teach pre-service teachers in the New York City college system in CUNY. So I see teachers as they start teaching and support them in at my school, but also support some of them before they join teaching in general.
That's so cool. What a unique role, and like the fact that you can like follow them along that path. So before we dive into your innovator story and all of the great things, we like to start with a little icebreaker, a browser tab confession. So we know that innovators are notorious multitaskers. So if we were to look at your browser right now, how many tabs might we see open? And is there anything in particular that might be surprising or curious?
Yes. So I at all times have seven profiles running. Each of them have approximately 20 tabs open.
Whoa.
Um, but I have one fun one, which I think you will probably not get from any of your other guests, which I designed for myself in my personal life, totally outside of teaching, is I am a matchmaker and I set people up and I vibe coded my own database.
Oh my God.
And I have three couples that have gotten married from my connections. So I'm just going to keep vibe coding away and making people meet the person they're meant to be with.
Oh, well,
I'm
that is the coolest thing.
I'm so excited to be like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get into your brain as we keep going through all of this because I think what you bring to our table, more so than other guests, is you have like the ability to think through building stuff. So we're gonna get into that in a little bit later. We're gonna hop back into our time machine, as I always say, to our Chicago 2024 cohort, which a lot of people are getting on to our podcast from that. And it's so great because it's so wonderful hearing from everybody and seeing, where everybody's gone to. And you came to Chicago, you had this idea that became a partnership with ClasStars. And so it's a project focused on like student growth, engagement, teacher impact. What was that problem you were seeing in schools that made you think this is something I want to solve? And how did you kind of go down the path of doing Google Innovators?
So I think that I notice a lot of connections between special education and technology. I think that you'll find a lot of times the people who end up being very involved in technology have a background in special education, whether it's because it's professionally or personally. There's just that connection between problem solving that aligns with both of those worlds. So before I taught technology, I was a special ed teacher for many years, and I noticed that students were failing on paper. They were making all this progress, and there wasn't really a space to recognize it. And I thought, what is a way that we can track progress similar to IEPs, but not always an IEP goal, so that students can track for themselves, their families can track, the administrators, whoever it is, can say, oh, wow, look how much growth you've had. And it went through so many iterations, but ultimately I found this tool that was starting to do that work. And I thought, let me work with them. Let me see how can I make this a tool that really reflects what I'm seeing in the classroom. And that's where my partnership with ClasStars started, and it is still evolving now.
That is so cool. Like, I totally agree with the special education connection. And I see that all the time, just when we're talking about like engagement and accessibility. But now to take it to that next level of really tracking and showing progress in ways that have been invisible. like up until now, other than the family members and the educators that are seeing these students. It's so hard because it's not tangible, and you've been able to do that with this project, which is just amazing. Can you talk a little bit about how it's evolving like now in the present, and where like things you've learned or where you guys are now?
Sure. So I thought at first that my work would mostly revolve around helping the app become what I thought it should be. And it's a really cool app that teachers can track their interactions with students. And it's a very simple, like swipe up or swipe down. And there's this concept that there should be a ratio of positive to negative interactions with students, but no teacher can actually calculate their interactions with students because we have thousands of them. So this tool just made it really easy to track, and there would be these cool avatars or like rings around them so you can see like, wow, these students who've been having some more negative interactions, maybe because they're struggling academically or there are other emotional barriers to learning, I'm going to go out of my way to make sure that they have a positive experience in school. And I thought that that would be it, and I would kind of check the box and that would be my project. But I realized that teachers need to learn about this tool and understand why it might be useful for them. So then I went more into the teacher training model. And this was around the same time that I was going into teacher training in general. And I think that my brain was around this, like being a professor and teaching teachers. And so I did that. I made a really succinct modules because no one wants to sit through long PD. And then I realized after that, wow, you're still in a silo. What we need is community. So it has really evolved from just being this app to being an app with teacher training to being a training that leads to a community of other teachers who are doing this work to support each other. So it's fabulous. And am I going to pretend that I know where it's going to go next? Not at all. But I think that's really the Innovator project, right? Like it's somehow never ending.
I think it's absolutely brilliant just because we've been thinking about it since 2024. It's been like a couple of years, right? And so seeing how your project has like reiterated over time, I think it's really neat that you kind of started with this idea that traditional measures of success were not necessarily the main point of trying to get students to understand if they're making progress, and then it led to the app and everything. But then you had just mentioned about being in a silo, and then you were talking about like community. So understanding community, do you feel like that's sort of how do you get teachers to realize that it's really important to capture these moments, and in that space of working with adult educators, are you focusing more on rethinking the traditional measures of success? Or are you focusing a little bit more on capturing and celebrating those important moments?
I think the answer is a little bit of both, but the way that I come at it and the way I come at most problems is where's the pain point and how can we address it? So for some people, the pain point is they're already noticing that the traditional measures of success are not celebrating their students. And those are generally my special education teachers or paraprofessionals who are already doing this work and feeling that barrier. But for other teachers, it's another barrier along the way. Maybe it's that they're not seeing why their students aren't doing well, and it's because that ratio is off, but they don't yet know what the problem is. And so they're turning to their colleagues and being like, what do I do with X, Y, and Z student, right? Like that's often a conversation that happens in the staff lounge or whatever. How can I support this student? How can I get through to them? And then finding community that way then comes back around to the that problem, addressing it and solving it with this tool. So I think that however people, how, whichever, if we can provide more tools, more entry points to the same tool, different people will have different problems that bring them to it.
I would just love to live inside your brain for like 5 minutes. You just have the whole package, right? So like you're not afraid of these difficult conversations that you're having with teachers and difficult problems, because so many of those problems just kind of sit on a shelf, like without being solved. And then you have this creative brain that's like, okay, now what are all, I just picture this like Rolodex in your brain of like, what can we try? What can we try? What can we try? But then you also have a very strong technical background that was showcased back in the Innovator Academy. You did a Spark Talk on AppScript, which at the time was terrifying to me. I was like, wow, this girl is a genius. Like, I was so scared of AppScript, but I have to tell you, your Spark camp that I went to was like, made it so manageable and understandable. And I'm still like not an expert at AppScript, but I always know I can go to you if I have questions. But that Spark Camp was that inspiration of like, okay, wait, I can access this. And I can see how you carry that to your teachers and down to your students of that like access point. But I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit about the Spark Camp experience? I know we have a lot of people listening who are either past innovators or looking forward to going to an Innovator Academy coming up. So can you talk to us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah. So before we got to Chicago, we got an email saying if you want to highlight something that you're good at or something that's interesting. And my mind went to tech because we're going to Google, so it should be tech. I was the only person who showed up with anything related to our profession, and I felt so dumb. We had yoga, we had knitting, we had bees and learning about how to cross-pollinate plants. I learned so much there from other people's Spark camps. And then mine comes up and I'm like, oh, well, you guys already heard so much about EdTech. Do you really want to even hear more? I assumed no one is coming to mine. But to my benefit, mine was in the main room. So no one really had to go anywhere to come to mine. So I think some people just landed at mine by default because they didn't want to get up or they like wanted to go back to their bag for something. So they're like, oh, I'll just stay here. But I presented, which is actually funny because I hadn't thought about it in a while. I presented what is now called vibe coding, which I love. But all I said was that here's this tool on the back end of Google that will connect different pieces and different information and again, solve a problem for you. If there's something that you're working really hard on, make it easier. Use an app script. And you don't have to know anything about coding. All you have to do is tell AI. And it's so funny because I completely forgot. And now I love vibe coding. And I'm like, of course I do. I've been talking about this for years, but I forgot that I was. But all I said was take AI, say, I want to do this in app scripts, and make it go. Take away one pain point from whatever it is that is challenging for you. So the example I gave was a little bit more extensive than a mail merge, but I had different pieces of information from different spreadsheets and different parts of our Google Drive on the back end in school. And I wanted to generate letters and I wanted to get a notification when it was printed. And so all I just said was, pull this information from here, pull this information from this spreadsheet. Here's my letter template, send it to print, and, or actually, maybe it was sent to email. I don't remember which one it was. But either way, make another column and write sent, write done when it was done. And that was it. And I had AI do it, and I actually modeled it live. And of course, the thing I was like, let's take from the audience. What do you want me to add to it? And then it didn't work. But I'm like, but that's the point. We just keep asking AI until it'll give us what we want. And I had like 2 minutes left, and then it was over, and I did not even solve the problem. But a lot of people came over to me. They're like, I didn't even realize I could do app scripts. I'm like, well, why not try? You know what I mean? Like that's all it is. So I'm so glad that you're considering it. And I encourage everyone listening to just try. Try one.
I don't even remember you failing. In my mind, it was like this eye-opening, perfect, amazing thing. And don't sell yourself short that you got that big room because you had a big audience.
I hope
I
so. I don't
agree.
know.
They knew you were going to be one of the top ones to try that out. And I think part of that idea is that app script seems so intimidating, right? You're like, I can't do an app script. I can't figure out how to solve a problem. Like, and then you said like, hey, they already had this app that was coming about that's, ClasStars and they're already thinking about stuff, but they need my expertise in that background. And I think that's one thing that's so great about your personality is you're like, why would you not just try? Like I think that's one of the biggest things is just go ahead and give it a try. And now it feels like vibe coding is kind of like you hear about it more now than you did, especially a couple of years ago. But I think people are still very intimidated about the idea of vibe coding, right? Like I would create this all on my own and it seems almost impossible to do. And no, 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 I don't know anything about coding. So I think now I have a couple of different questions because I'm very, very fascinated, first of all, about you vibe coding the match part because who needs to pay for any kind of match services anymore? But what advice would you have for someone creating their tools or where to even get started in vibe coding? And is there any other interesting thing you have vibe coded You already talked about one brilliant one, and maybe that tops it. But like, what are some other things since that time a couple of years ago that you have managed to create or started creating?
I think I vibe code everything now. My go-to when I have a problem and I Google it and there's no solution currently available, I just vibe code it. I do give it the parameters, at least at work. We're a Google for Education school, so I like to keep things that live in Google Sites. So that does limit some things. I have vibe coded outside of that. But when I recommend for people to start, just start within that. Let AI know that you're going to house this on a Google site so that it will inherently limit it to the functions that can be housed on a Google site. Also for me, for security, know that it can be housed in my school's domain. Um, but what have I done recently? My favorite thing is we're finishing up a vibe coding unit with my middle schoolers. And I said, I have been vibe coding a lot of independent work tasks. We did a whole AI ethics unit, and a lot of times the independent work feels a little bit dry. So I would vibe code an activity to match the topics we had just talked about. Like one of them was just the math behind AI. It's really cool to talk about. And then what are you going to go do a math worksheet? You know what I mean? Like it wasn't, there was no clear next step. So I vibe coded an activity for the students to do. And then like it was really cute. I had to at the end generate a little report with a little PDF, a certificate that they're done and they are an expert in the math behind AI and they're not going to just trust it blindly because they understand that it's just a mathematical equation. Um, but some students asked me like, "Oh, did you make this? Did you vibe code this?" And I said, "I did." When do we get to do that? Now, I had taught Python at the beginning of the year, and students, we ended with designing a video game, but they were all new to Python, so it was very limited in the amount of features that could be variable for students to change in their video game. The end result was supposed to be a functional video game, and that was it. So to end the school year, I said, okay, now you get to vibe code your own video game. You get to decide all of the variables. I made them keep it a math video game just so that there was some academics involved. My eighth graders were learning about scientific notation. Seventh graders were learning about different angles. That's it. Everything else is up to you. And we went through 3 rounds of iteration. And at the end of the unit, there was a really, really cool interface that, of course, I vibe coded where they could pick a different video game to play. And they're all like neon flashing retro, arcade vibes. And they clicked someone else's game, played it, and gave feedback. And the kids had so much fun. Literally today, when I told them, like, what's our end of unit? What's our final? And I was like, oh, you have to play video games. And their jaws all dropped. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you heard all these people asking all these interesting questions. Can I try this? Can I do that? Don't you want to go check out what they made? Ask them questions, give them feedback, and just say it was a win today.
That is so cool. I want to be in your class so bad. Oh my gosh, if I could go back in time and be in your class as a middle school student, that sounds absolutely amazing. Wow. So, I mean, what you just explained sounds so technical. Like if you aren't familiar with vibe coding and you're listening to this explanation, but what I'm hearing also is this human-centered component. Like so much of what you do in all of the projects that you've already talked about is removing barriers, whether that's barrier to romance with your app or barriers to learning or tracking growth, like everything you've talked about, it's that special education kind of mindset. And so I'm wondering, what do you wish that more educators understood about accessibility and inclusive design?
Sure. So it really touches to the heart of, I think, who I am. Like you said, students want to learn. There is not any child who comes to school because they're not interested. Yes, they're forced to legally, I think even across the world they are, but no one is sitting in your class because they don't want to learn. Kids at their core want to learn things. They want to get better at something. But a lot of them are conditioned after years and years of being put through a system that doesn't match their needs that they can't. And it's so, so sad to see kids who are so jaded and so conditioned to think that this is not for me. This is not a setting for me. So I think that if all you think is that this kid wants to learn at their core, how can I make it more interesting, more engaging, more physically capable? It's something as simple as changing their seat so they're closer to the board so they can see, you know what I mean? Like all those little things, all the way down to using AI as an executive function coach so that they can complete tasks, whatever we can do. And I always advocate for the first thing to be free and easy and, easy for the teacher as well. Let's make learning possible. And that kid will shine, will come through. They will learn something and they will be grateful to you, whether or not they can verbalize it, whether or not they can verbalize anything. If we just lead with that, they want to learn something. Every teacher started because they wanted to teach a kid something. And then we have that perfect match.
I I think what is so compelling is anytime we've had someone who we talk to on a podcast that is from special education, there's always this fervor of every student can learn. And I think that you have taken this to the whole other level with this idea of not only are you having the ability to learn, but from the adult learning standpoint, here are some strategies and things to think about that you can implement every day. And I think the idea of incorporating the students with vibe coding and obviously having an interest in seeing how AI can be a part of that. I think that that is something that you are innately very, very talented at. And I think, as we've mentioned before with when we met you in Chicago, that you are able to make those like computer science connections throughout everything. Understanding from that perspective and the place that you come from, like we keep hearing consistently that technology, like teachers are worried that it's going to replace, their teaching, that, there's this sort of push a little bit to like go back to pen and paper. And I understand that like technology should never replace relationships. And then you're talking about how you can totally incorporate AI and it's so powerful. How do we keep that human like aspect of things in the center of learning still, but incorporate that technology, but still make sure all the students' needs are met? I know that's kind of a heavy question, but like it feels like you're already kind of in that space. What do you think that would be if you had to give advice on that?
Well, I'll say on two sides. One, teachers are overworked. We all know that. So I often advocate for using AI to replace some of the barriers that teachers find themselves struggling to get through their workload so that they could spend the time developing the relationships, finding out what those students need so that they can make it more accessible to learning. You can't determine that if you're stuck behind a stack of papers that you need to grade, right? Or worksheets that you need to differentiate. Those are the places that we can use technology so that you can spend your time being with the people. The other side is that I actually completed a fellowship this year through New York City Public Schools thinking about equity in AI. And my end of year project was submitting a policy proposal where I talked about the cognitive friction that students need. And this isn't not exclusive to AI, but oftentimes we'll see students who there's this like learned helplessness, whereas if they don't get the answer immediately, they give up. We want to teach students that the challenge is the point of learning, especially now when they have the internet, they have AI. What we're teaching them is not to recall lots of information, which might have been the case 20 years ago, before we had the same access to information. A lot of school was how much information can you retain and can you apply it? Now we're talking a lot more about synthesizing information, using it in appropriate context. So what they're learning is different. We want them still to struggle through evaluating information, synthesizing information, engaging with it, taking it to the next level. And AI can help there, but not if they're just putting in an assignment and getting the answer, right? That is I don't want to have a barrier. I won't want to struggle with this. If we as teachers model the struggle, but also model using AI in appropriate ways, our students will grow up with less fear about AI and also an understanding of what its role is, not as a replacement for their brain. So, for example, you can model. and I do a lot. If I give a multi-day project, right? This project's going to last us a couple weeks. I'll put it into AI and say, hey, I want to work on this for 30 minutes a day for the next 2 weeks. Break it down for me. And so they can see what it's like to use AI in appropriate ways. And then they can go off and take that schedule and they can change it. Actually, I have soccer on Tuesdays. I'm not going to work on Tuesdays. Okay, I'll move that to the next day. Appropriate ways to use it. But also, as a teacher, asking for things like an AI log. If you use AI, how did you use it? Show me a screenshot or show me your chat log with whatever tool you used so that we can recognize that there are appropriate and inappropriate ways to use it. And I will evaluate you. I will model for you. I will teach you how to do it. And I will also support you in knowing that just getting the answer is not going to help you, right? We want them to have that cognitive friction. We want them to learn how to embrace the struggle and use AI to help them in the ways where the struggle becomes a barrier to learning, not where AI itself is the barrier to learning.
Wow. No notes. That was absolutely brilliant. You are always brilliant, but that specific explanation project and your results are just spectacular. So now I'm thinking of myself and other educators who are listening to this and who are nodding along, like leaning in, like, yes, yes, I want to do that. I want to do what she just said. That is right. And I want to do it. Where would you suggest someone being me and the people listening, what's a good first step to get to that place where you feel so confident to use those strategies and to do those things around this focus that you've discovered?
I think that it's starting off recognizing that your students and you are both human. So a lot of times people will say, I'm using AI, but don't tell anyone. Why not? Right? It's just a tool. No one is embarrassed to say that they Googled something. And this is just the same thing. So start small. If you're going to pick, I don't know, tr differentiating your worksheets, you can tell your students, hey, I just used AI to make these. Or in my case, when I vibe code to create an independent activity for them, I'll tell them really proudly, I used AI to make this for you guys. And if they ask how or why, I explain it to them. And the example I gave you with like, oh, I didn't want to just give you a math worksheet. I told my students that, and they were like, oh, wow, thanks so much. Because like the thought of doing a math worksheet at the end of this lesson would be not very fun. And this game that you made for us is very fun, right? Like, so just normalizing it. They're all using AI anyway. It's just a question of are they going to have the conversation with you or not. I think I've spoken to many teachers across the country from every age. And some people are like, I don't think my students know what AI is. They do, and they're using it. Let's not kid ourselves. So you can do things like put that little trick in AI where like what to trick the AI where you put something white in the assignment. If it says the word purple when there wasn't anything purple in there, you can do that. But it's more of a gotcha than like an actual teachable moment. So if you're transparent, um, with your students, they will be transparent back with you. And if there's still something that feels really uncomfortable for you, find those resources about AI ethics and talk to your students about it. I really love Young Data Scientists League, AIEDU. There are so many out there. Find the one that speaks to you and teach your students about it. Take a couple minutes, talk about it, and also admit that you're uncomfortable, right? Like when we just make this normal, your students will feel comfortable being uncomfortable. You will feel comfortable being uncomfortable. The mistakes will feel comfortable. And we all move forward together. There's no one who's an expert in AI. It's too new for any of us.
Well, that's great advice. Thank you. I put it in my journal and I will start following that tomorrow. I just love how courageous you are in these conversations with adults and with students around this topic that is so scary for some, because as educators, we tend to be content knowledge experts in what we're teaching, and we're finding ourselves in a place where we are really having to be continuous learners in a brand new literacy and a brand new understanding. So to have the courage to be able to have those conversations is just so inspirational. So for our listeners, you just mentioned some amazing resources, but if someone wanted to learn more about like your papers, your work, and the things you're doing, where can they find you? And do you have anything exciting coming up?
I am attempting to be more active on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Shira Moskovitz. I will be at ISTE 2026. I'm really excited to present. And I also write some content. We kind of talked about the accessibility piece. I write for understood.org, focusing on the accessibility and technology nexus. So you can find me there, and I write their teacher newsletter. So sign up for that.
Thank you so much for sharing your amazing advice, mostly to both of us and for all of our listeners. I'm going to leave off and say, everybody, look at Shira, go ahead and try AI, because the one thing that hit me was that no one ever felt embarrassed by saying that you Googled something. So if you are someone who wants to come on and admit that you do use AI for a lot of things, come on over as a past Google Innovator. If you are someone who is getting right into the Google Innovator program, and at this point there are a few people who just finished the Innovator program and you're working your way towards going on to that next step, please sign up and come on to our show. And don't forget that you want to try and stay connected, stay inspired, and keep it all unscripted.